So before we learn the Maimer itself, I just want to say a few words about today's day. So today is Chov Cheshvan, the 20th day of Cheshvan. And we had a gathering last night in honor of the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab. So first of all, to some people, it appears strange that you're celebrating a birthday. You can understand when a person turns a certain age, you celebrate the birthday, you wish them well, should have a nice healthy year next year. What's the point of celebrating a birthday of someone who passed over 100 years ago? But in Torah, birthday, in fact, every event is something which is eternal. And one of the most incredible things regarding birthday is that, especially by tzaddikim and maybe by everyone, the birthday has an effect on the neshama up there. In fact, when the previous Rebbe passed, it was 1950, and he was 69 years old. So what chapter Tillim do you say when a person is 69? Chapter 70. He passed away in Shvat. A few months go by, and in Tammuz, which is in the summer, on the 12th day of Tammuz is the previous Rebbe's birthday. He would have turned 70. And then he would have said chapter 71. But people were confused. Should we say the new chapter Tehillim, or now it's irrelevant? So of course, there's the Rebbe, his opinion. Good morning, Dvorah. Okay. I emptied it out already, so you can have it. You're welcome. So the Rebbe spoke about the fact that even after the passing of a tzaddik, we know that birthday is still relevant and it still continues. And one of the stories that he brought in support of this was that the Frierdiker Rebbe, in his diary, writes about an event that happened, which of course, by tzaddikim of this caliber, they were always in communication with tzaddikim of previous generations, and especially with those Rebbes that they were connected to. So there are many stories of the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, how they spoke to their father, and they learned together, and the same with every Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe writes how it was the 20th of Cheshvan, he heard a Maimer from his father, and the Maimer was on chapter 80 of Tehillim. Why chapter 80 of Tehillim? Because that year he turned 80. But when he passed away, the Rebbe Rashab was 59. His last chapter that he said was chapter 60. This is 20 years later. So the Rebbe said, we see clearly that even after the passing, there's a birthday, and there's, just like down here, a birthday means an additional year. Up there, it also means there's an additional year, and therefore, there is reason to celebrate birthday. Plus the fact we have one of the examples to this is in Gemara. In general, the idea of celebrating a birthday is something revolutionary by Chabad, which means in many circles, even today, Yidden don't celebrate birthdays. You won't find anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch that it says that on a birthday is a special day, you should act in a special way. In fact, people would make fun and say birthday is a secular thing. When people celebrate birthdays, it's because because in America, they celebrate birthdays. In France, they celebrate birthdays. In Russia, they celebrate birthdays. But we don't find this in the Shulchan Aruch to celebrate a birthday. But who was the one that introduced this idea that we should celebrate birthdays? It was the previous Rebbe. But when he did that, he also revealed that in previous generations, the Baal Shem Tov and other tzaddikim used to celebrate birthday, but for some reason or other, it was done in secrecy. It wasn't done public. It wasn't known publicly that a birthday is a special day. But then the Rebbe brought sources. One of the sources is in Gemara, out of all places. If you don't pay attention, you don't notice it. The Gemara says that Haman drew lots when he should do his plan of, God forbid, annihilating all the Jewish people. Everyone knows that he drew lots, came out in the month of Nisan. He said that's no good because the Jews went out of Egypt in that month. Came out the month of Sivan, says no, that's no good because they got the Torah in that month. And he went from month to month until he came to Adar. And what did he say in Adar? Oh, this is a good month for what he wants to do because in this month, Moshe Rabbeinu died. And that means it's not good luck for the Jews. What does the Gemara say? The Gemara says what he didn't know was that Moshe was born on Zion Adar. And in that merit, it was able to overcome the negative, and in that merit, the Jewish people were merited to see a great miracle, which is the miracle of Purim. So this is 1,000 years later after Moshe passed away, and yet we say that because it was born on that day, that schus is what helped and brought about the miracle of Purim. So clearly, first of all, we see that a birthday is found in Torah. It's in the Torah, there's a source that a birthday is very powerful. And second of all, even 1,000 years later, a birthday is very powerful because that's what happened in the times of Purim. And therefore today is Chov Cheshvan. It's a birthday for Big Tzaddik. We have the merit that we're connected to him. In fact, what I prepared to learn in class today, the Hashgacha Pratis is a new part of a Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab. It's in here, but it's from the Rebbe Rashab. So after I finish this, I will go into that a little bit. But the Rebbe Rashab, his chuz, his merit will affect all of us, especially by connecting to him. The mere fact that we're talking about him, learning something that he taught, we give extra tzedakah today, and we're able to benefit from the chuz of this day. So naturally, there's a lot of history about the Rebbe Rashab. There's a book that we're giving out of school that has a little bit brief, just a little bit of brief of the history. And I'm just going to give over a few things, brief, Sheba brief. Okay. So first of all, a few things that stand out. The Rebbe Rashab became Rebbe at the age of 22. His father, who was the previous Rebbe, Rebbe Marash, passed away at a very young age, at the age of 48. And he became the Rebbe at 22. But there were 3 sons. He was one son. There was an older son and a younger son. The Rebbe Rashab was the middle son. And when the Chassidim approached him to accept the leadership, he said, go to my older brother. When he approached the older brother, he said, go to my younger brother. And when it came to the younger brother, he said, go back to my older brother. And it went on like this for 10 years. None of them accepted leadership. In fact, during these 10 years, people stopped coming to the city of Lubavitch. There's nothing to come for. The Rebbe wouldn't say Maimarim. You couldn't go in to meet with him on a private audience. Whatever he did, if he did say Maimarim, because there are many Maimarim Chassidus from those years, but it was more in private. And the Rebbe did not accept the position of leadership for 10 years. 10 years later, there was a point where one of the older Chassidim made a meeting with other older Chassidim, and they just said, we can't go on like this. We have to have a Rebbe. We must do something about it. And they decided that these older Chassidim are going to travel all over Europe, wherever there are Chabad Chassidim, and urge them all to come to the city of Lubavitch for Rosh Hashanah. When the Rebbe will see this large crowd coming, he just won't have a choice. That's what they felt. And that's what happened. hundreds of people came for the first time in years to the city of Lubavitch. And they came and they basically told the Rebbe, we're waiting to hear from the Rebbe a Maimer. And the Rebbe came out and he did say a Maimer Chassidus. And that's when he started to take on leadership again. Even then, he was very young, he was 32. The Rebbe Rashab, there were 2 times in his life that he was very sick, so sick to the point that the doctors thought that he's not going to live. One was when the previous Rebbe was 9 years old. In fact, he wrote a will about how to educate his son. And that will is called Chanech Lenar. It's a very valuable document about education today. But it was written in connection to his illness that the doctors thought that he's not going to make it. The second time was again when the Rebbe Rashab, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was 17 years old, and the doctor told him that he has a few months to live. And he went to see the biggest doctors in Moscow. In fact, the Maimon we're going to be learning from is called Vyadaita Moscow. That's what it's called. It's the Maimon Vyadaita that the Rebbe Rashab said in Moscow when he visited these big doctors, and they gave up hope on him. But at the end, he overcame that and he lived for another 20 years. Now, the Rebbe Rashab's, every Rebbe of Chabad, one of the most incredible things are that in Judaism, in general, every generation is a continuation of before. I once said this in class, that one of the things which are so striking difference between the Torah world and the secular world. In the secular world, when a new leader comes to power, he always makes every effort to put down and make fun of and show how bad the previous leader was and how great I am. Just wait till when elections come up. And you hear what happens by elections? What are the campaign speeches? That the previous president is, what he's doing, he has no brains, he's destroying the country. I'm going to come now and I'm going to build the country. I'm the greatest and I'm the best. That's the normal, everyone accepts it. It's very normal in every country, Baruch Hashem. However, in the Torah world, it's just the opposite. Every tzaddik is drawing their strength from the previous. The Gemara is based on the Mishnah. The early commentary is based on Gemara. The later commentaries are based on the early commentaries. Everyone states Chassidim, it's also that way, that each generation of Chassidic Rebbes, the next generation draws from the previous generation. In Chabad, you see this just a little bit more openly, how it's one long continuation, and every Rebbe was just continuing what the Rebbe before him began. Path, a different title. Same thing. But it was still different. See, what's unique about the second Rebbe? What's unique about the third Rebbe? What's unique about our Rebbe? So one of the things that's unique about the Rebbe Rashab was the order and the manner, the way he taught Chassidus. His Maimarim, he took concepts of Chassidus, very deep concepts, but he explained them and elaborated on them, mamish like you learn Gemara. He took concepts of Chassidus and he brought it all together, put it into a structured way that we can understand it just like we understand halacha. So there was an older chassid, his name was Reb Shmuel Betzalel. He was a chassid of the previous generations, but he also merited to live in the times of the Rebbe Rashab. And he said he would call the Rebbe Rashab the Rambam of Chassidus. Just like the Rambam took vast Torah and he organized it and structured it into 14 volumes of halacha, made everything very clear. That's what the Rebbe Rashab did with Chassidus. With Chassidus, it's even more difficult because the concepts are so abstract and there's so many details, and yet he brought it all together. So it was a very unique way of transmitting and teaching the concepts of Chassidus. And there are many Maimarim from the Rebbe Rashab. They're all in a similar style. but there are two that stand out. If you ever hear the expression, you know what it is. One of the Maimar of the Rebbe Rashab is called Samach Vov, and one is called Ayin Beis. Generally speaking, when Chassidim refer to a Maimer, they'll refer to the first open. But not only did he say a Maimer that was very deep, but the next week's Maimer was a continuation of the week before. And the next week's Maimer was a continuation of the week before. And there are 68 parts to this Maimer. And it's very deep. And it's all elaborating on all connected subjects. Ayin Beis is the year Tofresh Ayin Beis 1912. That year the Rebbe Rashab began a Maimer, and that Maimer is even longer and even deeper. That lasted also for a few years, and that has, I think, 144 Maimarim in the continuation. It's all Chassidus and elaborating on it in detail. 144 Maimarim in the continuation. We're going to learn. And then there's one more thing, which is sort of considered in some ways, I think it's considered the crown jewel of the Rebbe Rashab's accomplishments, and that is that he established the yeshiva, which is called Tomchei Tmimim. Now, a lot of people made yeshivas. So what was unique about this yeshiva? So the whole purpose of the Baal Shem Tov was to take Chassidus, which for centuries, and since the beginning of creation was hidden, even after the Torah was given, this part of Torah was hidden. And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar, started to reveal a little bit. The Arizal, who was the great teacher of Kabbalah, started to reveal a little bit more. And the Baal Shem Tov started to reveal more. And every generation, every Rebbe began to reveal Chassidus more and more, made it more accessible. The Rebbe Rashab was a new stage, a new era in the process of revealing Chassidus, and how did that manifest in the yeshiva that he established? There was never such a thing before as a yeshiva, where they learn Gemara for many hours a day, like any other yeshiva. And on top of that, the young men also study Chassidus for many hours a day. I need to point out that before the Rebbe Rashab made this yeshiva, Bachrim, yeshiva students, did not study Chassidus. They studied Tanya, maybe a little bit. A Maimer, maybe once in a few months they would study a Maimer. But to have a yeshiva, Bachrim would be studying Chassidus. In those days, it was 4 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night. That was sort of unheard of. Now, here we are, girls are studying Chassidus every day, an hour a day or more. In those days, for Bachrim to learn Chassidus so many hours a day was revolutionary. Even the older Chassidim were a little bit hesitant. They couldn't understand it's like Chassidus was never meant for such young kids. In fact, there was one Chassid that said, oh, now I understand what it says, that when Mashiach will come, Chassidus will go all the way to the outside. Oh, outside means that these young yeshiva bachrim who are still undeveloped, they don't have real love and fear of Hashem, and they're studying Chassidus. They never saw a college campus, I guarantee you. So they thought this was the outside world, these young bachrim learning Chassidus. That's how revolutionary it was in those days. So the Rebbe created the yeshiva. The yeshiva ran for a year. That was a trial to see how it would go. The Rebbe Rashab was very pleased with the way the yeshiva ran, with the progress of the Bachrim. And at that time, he didn't even give a name to the yeshiva. And the reason was because it was only a trial. A name makes it more permanent. So he waited for a year. And a year later, it was Simchas Torah. It was during the 7th HaKafa. And in the 7th HaKafa, there are certain things that we say out loud with a special tune. And it goes according to the Aleph Beis. The last one is with a Tuf. And the words are Toimech Tmimim Hoshiana. Hashem supports those who are complete Hashem, help us. So the Rebbe Rashab was holding the Torah in his hands, going around in the circle. Then he stopped and said, the yeshiva still has no name, but it does have a name. The name of the yeshiva will be Tomchei Tmimim, and those who study in the yeshiva will be called Tmimim. And the reason is because when you study both the revealed part of the Torah and the hidden part of the Torah, then your Torah study is complete. Tamim means complete. And when you study both, the hidden part of the Torah is like the soul of the Torah. The revealed part of the Torah is the body of the Torah. And when you study both, it's complete. And then he said, he went on, and since then, this is the name of the yeshiva. And the Rebbe pointed out that all yeshivas that are under the Rebbe's auspices, makes no difference if it's called Beis Rivka, Beis Chana, Mochen Leyadus, any name, Achet Tmimim, doesn't matter. If it's under the Rebbe's auspices, it has all the qualities and all the brachas of Tomchei Tmimim. And this is something that is very special by the Rebbe. Books were written on things that were said regarding the yeshiva, the merit of being a student in the yeshiva. So this is the day that we sort of celebrate Tomchei Tmimim. And the Rebbe Rashab went, after the yeshiva was established for 3 years, he gathered all the students, also Simchas Torah, and he spoke to them, and he said words then which were like a prophecy, not like a prophecy, a prophecy. And he said, I have been guaranteed. And then he added, I'm sure everyone knows the difference between I guarantee or I have been guaranteed, meaning to say I've been guaranteed from a higher source that the students of this yeshiva will ultimately be spread in the 4 corners of the world, and they'll be spreading Chassidus and Yiddishkeit, and mainly the Amunah in Mashiach. So this is something which we see fulfilled with our eyes today, and that was said over 100 years ago, and that's pretty much a clear prophecy of something which is happening. And there's more things that he said and are going to happen about what's going to happen in Russia with the communists and so on. So this is the day, and in fact, what we'll do now is learn a mimer from the Rebbe Rashab on the subject of Nisayon, exactly the subject we're dealing with. Okay. So I am on page 6b. This mimer has a name. I said before, it's called Yodaita Moskva. The Rebbe, generally speaking, was not a Moscow, he lived in Lubavitch, but because he went to see those specialists, the doctors, he was a Moscow, and there he said this mimer. And this mimer happens to be one of the most fundamental mimarim of the Rebbe Rashab. In Hayom Yom, you will find that every Rebbe of Chabad had a mimer or 2 or 3 that they would repeat the same thing a few times throughout their lifetime. And the purpose was, through this mimer, they would purify the air in a spiritual way. Just like there's a Gashmizik air purifying machine, this is a spiritual air purifier. And each Rebbe had one of the mimarim, and it is translated in English. The only problem is it's only English, not Hebrew English. It's only English. And we do have it here in the library. It's a long mimer, but very fundamental. So the part that we're going to do on page 6b, I underlined in the middle of the page, it says, let's explain the inyan of Nisyonos. Why does Hashem test us? But we need to give an introduction before we do the mimer inside. What did he explain up until this point? And then we'll see how this fits in. So the general Which page? 6b. The Mimer begins with the words, you should know today, Ki Hashem hu Elokim, that Hashem is God. You should take this to heart. And we have this in davening. We say it in Aleinu and other places in davening, but it's a pasuk in Chumash. You should know today that Hashem is Elokim. On the surface, what do these words mean? What do you mean Hashem is Elokim? It's like saying you should know today that this person whose name is Yosel, he's Yosel. Oh, of course. Hashem is Elokim. So the way the Zohar explains it is that there are two names of Hashem. One is Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the other is Elokim. So we should know that in essence, both names are really one. The main question of the Mimer is, how could we say that these two names are one when actually, according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, they're opposites? There are two ends of the spectrum. What is the difference between the two names, Hashem and Elokim? So we have, the source for this is in Tanya, and over there it explains based on a pasuk in Tehillim. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter something. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's 80 something or other, where it says, Kishemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim, that God, your God, is like the sun and a shield. Like a sun and a shield. So ordinarily, we interpret that to mean that Hashem is like the sun. He gives us light. He gives us warmth. He gives us energy and all the other things that the sun could be used as a metaphor. Just like the sun does so much for us, Hashem does that for us. The second thing is, just like a shield protects us, that's how Hashem protects us. But the Alter Rebbe explains it deeper. In the pasuk it says, Shemesh u'mogen, the sun and a shield, Havaya Elokim, and he uses two names. So he says one name, Hashem is being compared to the sun. The other name, Hashem is being compared to a shield. What does that mean? So we just learned in the Chumash, Parshas Vayera, it was very hot. Why was it very hot? Right, the sun has a shield around it. I don't know what science has to say about it, but the sun has a shield around it. That's what it says in Torah. Because the sunlight itself is so strong, is so intense, it would just burn us up. So Hashem created some sort of a filter around it, that the light should not be so intense. And that shield is called Mageh. Mageh means a shield, a protecting shield. On that day, what did Hashem do? He took the sun out of the shield, and it became so hot that nobody was able to go outside, only the angels. Spiritually, it means like this, that the name Havaya and the name Elokim, in which way are they different? So we had in the Maimer, Elokim is Gematria what? Ateva, nature. What's Havaya? What?
26.
That we know, but how is it in verses Teva? So he said Havaya also means Hoya, Hova, V'yiya Ke'echad. That Hashem, past, present, and future is all one, which means above nature. So Hashem does not have the limitations of nature. So Hashem Havaya represents Hashem's light that's infinite. If Hashem would shine his light in this world, infinite light, this world couldn't contain it, couldn't exist. So Hashem makes a shield, something that covers on it, and that causes the light to be limited and causes the light to be restricted. And as a result of that, the world could survive. So the difference between the name Havaya and Elokim is really similar to the difference between the sun and the shield. The sun is the source of light, but it's very strong. So we need a shield to limit that light and reduce the intensity so the world could receive it. The same is with Havaya and Elokim. The light of Havaya is bligvul, is infinite, and infinite we can't receive, we can't contain. So the name Elokim blocks that light so that it shouldn't be so intense, and we're able to receive it. So if that's the case, then Havaya and Elokim are two opposites. Havaya is revealing godliness in an infinite way. Elokim is concealing the godly light and making everything finite and limited. That's why Elokim is b'gematria hateva. So how can we say that an Havaya Elokim is one? That's the question. Does anyone have any question on the question? Is it clear, the question? So the whole purpose of the Maimer from the beginning to the end is to explain how is it possible that Havaya and Elokim are one. And he gives different explanations. Each one, it's almost like climbing a ladder. He gives one explanation, then a deeper explanation, then a deeper explanation, and a deeper explanation. But in order to understand what he's going to say here about tests, I don't want to learn an insight because that's going to take very long. So I'll give you the main thrust of it, and then we'll be able to get to this part. The main thrust of it is that when Hashem hides his light through the name Elokim, so you're asking, oh, this is concealment and this is revealing. So he says, but the purpose why Hashem conceals the light is so that his light should be able to shine. So really the purpose of Shem Elokim is just like Shem Havaya. In other words, if there'd be two forces, one is here to reveal, the other one is resisting and fighting it and concealing. They're two opposites. But when Hashem conceals his light, the purpose is that we should be able to receive the light. So in essence, Havaya and Elokim are really part of one thing. It's all about Hashem revealing his light in this world. In order to explain this, he gives a mashal. And the mashal is of a teacher and a student. And the teacher, we're talking about not an ordinary teacher, but a Torah scholar who is really one of these brilliant, brilliant Torah scholars. And he understands Torah on a very, very deep level. The way he understands logic, intelligence is so deep and so abstract that there's no way he can communicate this to his students. They just would be too much for them. Just like, for example, if there's something we understand and you try to explain it to a 4-year-old, he won't understand what you're talking about. Why? Because it's too abstract. If you show him a candy, he knows what you're talking about. If you show him apples and oranges, he knows what you're talking about. But if you're going to give him a mathematical equation, it's too abstract for him. He won't get it. So they're a teacher of Torah who understands the depth of Torah on a very, very deep level. And the only way that he could possibly communicate this to his students is by taking these concepts and, in a sense, bringing it down, watering it down, and hiding the real depth of it and giving it over to the students. And how does he do that? Through a mashal. Now, perhaps you came up with this in previous classes, so I'll say briefly that the Gemara says that Rabbi Meir was an incredible, brilliant genius that no scholar in his generation could match up with him. He was so brilliant that he said 300 mishalim. In fact, after he passed away, there was nobody on that level that could say the mashal. The question is, saying a mashal is such a big deal? I bet you if I give a project to you in this class, I give you 5 days to create a mashal for something, not a problem. You sit down. Hashem is the king, the Jewish people are the queen, Hashem is the chassan, the Jews are the kala, and you explain something with a mashal. What's the big deal? So what's the big deal? It's not such a big deal. Yes, you need a lot of time, you need a lot of creativity, But it's not so, you don't need to have the most brilliant person in the whole world to be able to give Mishalim. So he said 3,000 Mishalim. So the Chassidus explains it as like this, that when you have a concept that's very deep and very abstract, story, there's a message here, there's a meaning here, there's something, there's a concept here, concept in a way that they could get it, but they get just the outside, the outline, the skeleton. And then, as they delve into it, they'll be able to understand more. So I'll give you a mashal. There are places in Chassidus where it explains the difference between Chochmah and Bina. There are fire. So when you give the difference between fire and water, you understand fire is like this and water is like that. But then if you would have to explain it about Chochmah and Bina, so you need a mashal in order to make it understood. I'm not giving you the actual concepts. I don't want to go off on a detour, but I'm just saying that fire and water we can understand. And when we talk about the differences, we can understand. But there's a message that's deeper. Through this, we should be able to understand the difference between Chochmah and Bina. So if the concept is not so very deep, you don't need, I'll just mention this. The Gemara says Rabbi Meir said 300 Mishalim, and we only know 3 of them. But I'll give you an example of one of the Mishalim, one mashal. This is the mashal. There was a fox past a vineyard, saw the grapes, and he really wanted to have the grapes. But the gate was blocking him, and there was space between one stick and another, but he can't get in through, he's too fat. So the fox fasted for 3 days. He came very thin and went right through the gate, went into the vineyard, and he had a feast. He ate, and he ate, and he ate, and he ate. And then he couldn't get back out. He had to fast again for 3 days, then he was able to go back out. It's a nice, cute little story. You can feed a little child some kasha when you tell the story, but there's a message here, something much deeper. And that deep message is so deep and so abstract that the only way to communicate it is through this mashal. Because when you give a mashal, you hide the depth. You see something simple. Later, you start looking into it and you realize, wow, this is this idea, this is that idea, and you start going and figuring out more and more things. What happens if the mashal is so deep that the child can't even understand the mashal? So you need a mashal for the mashal. I'll give you a mashal. I just told you that we can use fire and water to explain Chochmah and Bina of a person, right? But Chochmah and Bina of a person, isn't that a mashal for Chochmah and Bina in the spheres? You can't compare the spheres and my Chochmah and Bina in my brain. So if somebody wants to explain something about Hashem's spheres, they'll use the example of the Chochmah and Bina in a person, but they don't understand that. So they use the example of fire and water. So you have a mashal for a mashal to explain a deeper concept. This is what it means, the Gemara says. Rabbi Meir was so brilliant, so deep, so abstract, that for each and every concept that he taught, he needed 300 mishalim to bring it to his student. Shlomo Melech was even greater and deeper and more brilliant. He was so deep that he needed 3,000 mishalim to bring down to his students this one concept that he understands. So basically, the purpose of mashal is to hide the concept. So now I ask a question. So what is the purpose of the mashal? To withhold the information from the student or to give the information to the student?
No, to give the information.
What?
To give it.
To give. On the surface, I'm hiding it. I'm concealing it. But the purpose really is the opposite. I want him to have the information. But the only way that he can have the information is if I hide this deep concept. And slowly and gradually you get to understand the depth after many years. So the same is with Hashem. Hashem's light is infinite. And he wants to shine this light into this world. But this world can't handle infinite light. So he hides the infinite with Shem Elokim, which is finite. And the purpose is not to withhold the infinite light. The ultimate purpose is that we should be able to experience the infinite light. But the only way we can do that is by first hiding it, concealing it, and then slowly through Torah, through mitzvahs, through meditation, we'll start to be able to feel and experience the infinite light of Hashem. But if it would give it to us as it is, we'd just be blown away. So if we ask a question, what's the purpose of Shem Elokim? It's not the opposite of Shem Havaya, it's the same. Shem Havaya is to give us this light, and Shem Elokim is to get the light. The only difference is Shem Elokim withholds the depth of the light so we can get it. And therefore, Havaya and Elokim are really one. You understand my mashal?
That's crazy. Conceal to reveal.
So the concealment is really revealing.
That's why all the books of Chabad,
Right, because the concepts are very deep. So in fact, the Gemara says, I'll finish with this, that real students of great sages, it would take them 40 years to fully understand what their teacher taught. 40 years. Which means when the teacher taught it, he taught it in a way they can understand it, but not given the whole depth. And then throughout the years, they delve deeper into it, and only after 40 years will they really fully be able to understand and appreciate what they were taught 40 years earlier. So ultimately, I get to the same.
So the Nisayan is just a mashal in order for us to
Brilliant, you hit it right on the button. That's what he's going to say.
more.
Now I know you understood what I said. Right, that's it. The Nisayan is the mashal, is Hashem's mashal, Hashem's concealment. Yeah, we'll learn it inside, you'll see. Okay, to be continued.
Oh.